Hi, my name is Beth Massey and welcome to the Windows Forms over Data video series. In this next video, I'm going to show you how to deploy a local SQL Express database to your users. In the last video, I showed you how to work with SQL Express local data files in Visual Studio. SQL Express is a free version of SQL Server that you can download. There's also a free tool called SQL Server Management Studio Express that you can use to work with SQL Express databases. I have the application we created in the previous video open now in Visual Studio. Using SQL Express local data files works well when you have a single user application like this one, but you can easily go multi-user later by attaching the database file to an instance of SQL Server Express or other SQL Server additions, and then just changing your connection string in the app config file. I'm going to show you how we can deploy a single user application with a local data file using Click Once. So what we're going to do to deploy this is I'm going to double click on my project and then we're going to go to the Publish tab. And on this tab we can configure how we want our application deployed. So I'm just going to expand this a little bit. And this is the tab we need to use to work with Click Once settings. So first we have a publishing location that we can specify. And the publishing location can be a website, an FTP server, or just a file path. In our case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it on a file path called cdeploy. Okay, the next thing is I'm going to set the application available is online and offline, so that means that it will be launchable from the Start menu. Now what I'm going to do is go into Application Files, and you'll see that we've got the MDF file and the log file set as data file auto. Well, we don't want to distribute the log file, so I'm just going to set this as exclude. So the rest is okay. So we're going to require the exe in the config file. This is where our connection string is. And then the data file is the MDF file. And when we specify that the publish status is data file, this means that it will only be deployed once. Okay, so if we do any kind of updates to the application, it won't overwrite our database. But that also means if we update the schema of our database, we have to handle any kind of update scripts manually. Okay, so that's what we need to do. That's the key when we're working with local data. So the next thing we're going to take a look at is the prerequisites. So this is the prerequisites that we need to have installed on the person's computer before they can run our application. So by default, .NET Framework 2.0 is selected. And then we have the SQL Server 2005 Express Edition is also here, and it's selected. And that's because we have the local data file inside our project. So what I want to do, though, is I do not want to download the prerequisites from the vendor's website. Instead, I want to download them from the same location as my application. So this will put SQL Server Express installer, the Windows installer, and the .NET Framework installer all inside of the same location as the cdeploy, which is where I'm putting my application's deployment. Okay, so click OK. So now we're going to go ahead and select Updates. And we can check for updates. This particular application will just be deploying on a CD, so I don't want to necessarily check for updates. But we could have it check for updates if we, for instance, were deployed to a web server and users were connected to the internet. Okay, so we're just going to click OK there. Okay, and now we're going to select Options. And this is where it gives us a chance to put our name in here. So I'll just put my name and the product name. Okay, and if you have a support URL. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to check for CD installations to automatically start the setup exe when the CD is inserted. Okay, then I'm going to click OK. Okay, so now we're ready to publish, so we'll just click the Publish Now. And this will create our deployment package for us in the location we specified, along with all of the installations for SQL Express and the .NET Compact frame and the .NET Framework. So it just takes a minute here. And once it's finished, it'll open to that location. Okay, so here we go. We've now got published to our cdeploy, and you'll notice that I've got the framework and SQL Express and the Windows installer all here. So now all we need to do is we can click Setup exe, and that will set up our application. So I can go ahead and install. And now it runs our application. So I can put some data in here, press save. Okay, great. Okay, so now let's make a simple change to our application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, say, another button here. And let's just make it do something funny. Okay. All right, great. So build. Everything's good. So now what I want to do is I want to deploy this application again. Okay, so I want to make sure that my data file, though, is not overwritten. So we should still have our data changes in there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go back to here, and we'll just republish the application. So it's doing all the same thing again, except you'll notice that our published version has now been incremented for us. Okay, so here's the location again. So now when I go ahead and click Setup EXE, you'll notice that our data has been preserved, but we have this additional button here, which indicates we've got a new version of the application running. Okay, so that's how it works to go ahead and deploy local SQL Express database files with your applications. Just make sure that you always install from the same directory, in our case cdeploy, or if you pass this on to a CD, make sure the customer always deploys from their CD, and you'll be good to go. So that's how we deploy local SQL Express databases. Now make sure we're only deploying to a single user type of scenario here so that the MDF file is deployed to the machine or the same place the application is. If you want to go multi-user in the future, that's really easy to do with SQL Express. You just have to attach this local SQL Express database to a SQL Express instance and remove it from your deployment package here by selecting application files, and in this case we would exclude the data file. Okay, but you want to include the data file if it's a single user app. Just keep in mind that if you do make changes to your schema, when you update your application, you will still have to manage the updates to the database manually with scripts. Okay, so make sure that you're only deploying the data file to a single user scenario, and you're only doing it if you don't have any updates to the database yet. Okay, so that's all there is to it. So I'd like to thank you for your time. If you'd like to check out the Visual Basic Developer Center, we'll be posting updates to these videos there. Please also check out the Visual Basic team blog and my blog for more information. Thanks again.